Thank you, Kevin. Now we move on. We'll skip our next speaker, so we go to our last speaker, which is Louise Helmer. And after that, we probably will have a little bit of extra time since our fourth speaker isn't here for questions. So Louise, is, as I said, is from Denmark, and we're all watching very anxiously because Denmark will have a vote next month, and we think it's of crucial importance, and we hope the Danish keep up the tradition of telling the EU where to go. Louise.
Yes, thank you. And we in Denmark are also quite excited about your exit referendum. You know, Denmark came into the EEC together with Britain, and now we hope we'll leave the European Union together with Britain. First, I would like to say something about the journey we made together in the 60s and early 70s. In 1963, Britain applied for membership of what was then called the Common Market. In Denmark, that was a signal to apply for membership as well. Why? Because the British bought so much of our butter and bacon that remaining outside would be a disaster for what was then seen as the principal export industry of our country. But as the French president, Charles de Gaulle, who was no friend of European unity, vetoed British membership, the Danish bacon lobby relaxed for the time being. Around 1970, the issue arose again, and Britain, Ireland, Denmark, and Norway applied for membership of the European Economic Community, the EEC. Denmark has a constitution that requires a referendum on handing over so much national power, and Norway decided to have a consultative referendum. This made way for a unique debate on a political issue. At that time, Norway and Sweden together actually bought 30% of Denmark's exported goods, the same as Britain and Germany together. And feelings about Nordic brotherhood were strong. We had actually succeeded in achieving compatible legislation in the Nordic countries on most of the issues that are important to ordinary people. For instance, we abolished passports between our countries, much simpler than having a uniform European passport. We had and have a common Nordic labor market and recognize one another's exams and qualifications. We have approached our family legislations to one another, and so on and so forth. This is the international model of cooperation as opposed to the European ideal of a supranational model. But the bacon lobby was still strong. Denmark had about 200,000 farms, many of them small family-run farms. And Denmark was young as an industrial and urbanized nation. Most of us had relations and friends among the farmers, and farming had not yet acquired the industrial character it has now. The summer and early autumn of 1972 saw a political debate that reminded of warfare, something unusual in my normally compromise-seeking people. Most of the political parties favored a yes, partly for economic reasons, partly in order to, as they said, to have a seat at the table. And the yes side argued that the economy based on farming and food industry would suffer shipwreck, that we would let our cousin the farmer down, and also that we would never ever be able to buy coffee or washing machines because of the soaring prices of imported goods. And the others would never ever play with us again. And that's one of the worst things you can say to a Dane. As late as in September 1972, less than a month before the referendum on EEC membership, there was a small no majority. But the result of the referendum on October the 2nd was 63% for yes and 37% for no. The participation in this voting was over 90, which is rather fantastic. By the way, now Denmark has 30,000 farms, most of them industrial-run monsters that have swallowed up their neighbors and offer wages that only Ukrainians and Lithuanians would accept. Well, the next referendum came in 1986 on the single market. Some of the otherwise EU enthusiastic parties had become somewhat worried to see that the EEC was really meant to become an ever closer union. But nevertheless, the result was 56% yes and 44% no. But it is a sign of the rising doubts that the participation was only 75%. Better stay at home than admit that you had made a mistake. The turning point came in 1992 when we had a referendum on the Maastricht Treaty. Even we who had campaigned hard for a no were amazed when we saw the 50.7 majority for no. The participation here was 83%. My husband and I, who hadn't even bothered to leave our home and TV in order to go to a social gathering of our friends, were so flabbergasted that we didn't even go downstairs to get our lonely bottle of champagne. And then the telephoning began. All night long we received excited calls from friends from Finland to Ireland. We had done it. But we were not going to be let off so easily. We couldn't be allowed to stop the process for all the other member countries, because then they would never ever play with us again. Our government began negotiations and ended up with the Edinburgh decision, allowing Denmark 4 opt-outs on the common currency, on defense, on justice and home affairs, and on the European citizenship. These 4 were seen as essential if the country should still be able to call itself a sovereign nation. It was called the National Compromise. The second referendum in May 1993 resulted in a 75% yes and a participation of 84%. This set a pattern for the later referenda in France and Ireland on the European Constitution, and the lesson was learned. If you vote yes, it's fine, and that's that. But if you vote no, you have to do another referendum. In 1998, Denmark voted on the Amsterdam Treaty, result 55% yes majority, and a participation of only 75%. A majority had learned the lesson and voted yes or stayed at home, disillusioned. The EU-friendly parties smelt blood. And in 2000, they proposed that we should have a referendum on abolishing the opt-out on the common currency and replace the krone with the euro. But this time, the no side felt optimistic. This was a core symbol, both of being Danish and being Nordic, as Sweden, Norway, and Iceland also had a krone. And the result was 53% no and an 88% participation. I was in the Parliament House on that evening, and on arrival I heard key yes people telling one another in incredulous voices that it was rumored that it was going to be a no. It was a decidedly nice evening. And now, on December the 3rd, we are going to vote on what the government calls a transformation of the opt-out on legal justice and home affairs into 22 instances of opt-ins, meaning in practice that one parliament will now be able to hand over parts of our justice policy to the EU. And what they hand over, no subsequent parliament will ever be able to take back. The Yes campaign is trying to focus only on our participation in the European police cooperation, because at the end of 2016, the European police cooperation will no longer be international but supranational, national. And then Denmark, they say, will be left all alone among traffickers, child molesters, and terrorists, just as in Norway, you know. Well, Norway has a parallel agreement with Europol, and no one could call Norway a den of international iniquity. And if Russia or Colombia, just to mention a few of the 18 other countries who have cooperation agreements, could have one, why shouldn't Denmark be able to have it? Would that be to punish us for not being good, or what? The issue we are voting about is extremely complicated, and it's made extra complicated. And I have found a description of what is happening made by a friend of mine who is a lawyer, and I think it's very good, and I'll just quote it. In plain Danish, the opt-out on justice and home affairs means that we can decide what is law and justice in our own country. The mere thought of giving up this ought to start all the alarm bells. The reason for the yes parties for having this referendum just now is that we should slip out of the EU police cooperation. The reason is that the EU has adopted new rules which will abolish the present cooperation and replace it by a supranational arrangement in which we shall not be able to participate because of the opt-out. Why should we vote no? It's not necessary to abolish the opt-out in order to cooperate in the fight against crime. As it is now, Denmark has an intergovernmental agreement with the other EU countries, and that arrangement should just be continued. Another reason that it would not be wise to abolish the opt-out is that it would give our national parliaments the right to pass large parts of the penal code, the civil code, and the policy on refugees and immigrants over to the EU at will and without asking the electorate. In practice, that means that we would leave it to the Europhiles to decide what is going to happen. And we shall not be able to take these areas back if we repent. End of quote. At last, I'll just say that the many referenda on Denmark's relationship with the EU have been an indispensable factor in keeping the democratic debate and the level of information alive, and to remind the parties in power that they are out of step with a very large percentage of their voters. Every confrontation has brought us closer to an EU exit. Denmark entered the European Economic Cooperation together with Britain. Now we are hoping to leave the European Union with Britain. Good luck to our two referenda.
Yeah.